Welcome, everybody, to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends. Today, we're talking to a good friend of the show, Ben Norton. Ben Norton is a brilliant guy. He runs Geopolitical Economy Report, and he talks a lot about the U.S. and China and our declining role as a superpower and their ascendant role as a superpower. And he's going to get into the tariffs, the trade war, basically everything around the economic decisions that Trump has been making and the impact it'll have. And I'm sure he has some spicy things to say about that.
There is no one better on this particular topic than Ben Norton.
That's right.
So we've been trying to get him for a few weeks. He can be difficult because he's oftentimes in China or other places. And so super excited to talk to him. You guys should be watching all of his videos because we have been, and they have been very instructive.
Yeah, they have been. So got a lot of stuff to get to before we do that, though. So this one just came across my radar. Senator Lisa Murkowski, the Republican of Alaska, she's one of these Republicans who's viewed as like one of the most moderate
She's often very concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, she is the very concerned one, right? And she was at some event, and this is raising eyebrows because of her reaction, but she basically talks about, like, she's asked about, like, hey, what do you say to people who are afraid? And here's her reaction.
What are you going to have to say to people who are afraid? Or who represent people who are afraid? We are all afraid. Okay? That's what I've stated. But we are, we're in a time and a place where I don't know. I certainly have not. I have not been here before. And I'll tell you, I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice because retaliation is real, and that's not right. But that's what you've asked me to do. And so I'm going to use my voice to the best of my ability. And sometimes it will be viewed in a way that, well, that's pretty confrontational. And other times it's going to be using my mother's charm that I learned as a young girl and in direct communication with those that I have made relationships with and am able to affect some change that way. But I've got to figure out how I can do my best to help the many who are so anxious and are so afraid.
Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings about that. You are in the majority party, and, you know, she's basically explaining how, like, she's afraid too. I'm afraid too. And it's like, we kind of need you to be one of the people that steps the fuck up right now. So apparently in the first term, she voted with Trump over 70% of the time, right? And she always, I'm concerned, but then she usually votes with them.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I'm sure when it comes to Trump's picks, she was, like, through the roof voting in favor of them.
Right.
And now these are the stormtroopers enacting fascism right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I haven't followed every word she said. I haven't seen her say anything about the mass project of disappearing people into a foreign gulag in El Salvador. You know, seems like something you might want to raise your voice about, kind of an important one right there. So I had the same reaction you did of, like, it's refreshing in a sense to hear her honestly give her reaction there of, like, I'm afraid too, and the retaliation is real, and, you know, it's scary times and it shouldn't be that way. And of course we know that is the case. We see the retaliation, and we're going to talk later about Harvard. We see the media, we see these law firms, we see the way that they're going after the entire state of Maine. And also we've seen the way that Republicans specifically, like the Liz Cheneys of the world, who've stood up against Trump and broken from him. I mean, they become targets. They become villains. And I'm sure that they feel that their safety is at risk and everything else. So, you know, it's nice to hear her acknowledge that. But then it's like, okay, but what are you going to do? Where is that voice? You say that they sent you there to have that voice. And of all the Republicans in the House or the Senate, she is the one that has the most political independence, because they tried to take her. She was able to win a write-in campaign previously. They tried to take her out. She was able to succeed. Alaska has a little bit different politically, et cetera. So she can claim the most sort of like political separation and mandate separate apart from just being part of the party of Trump or just being a Republican. She has the most room to operate. But, if she's going to be part of standing up against the lawlessness, authoritarianism, and fascism, I haven't really seen that yet.
But this is what the fascists rely on, right? The implicit threats.
That's right.
The like, hey, maybe I'll turn my mob on you or whatever.
Yeah, it's the obeying in advance. That's what it is.
But if we all stay together, there's nothing they could do. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
like if everybody stands up, what are you going to do? You're going to come after literally every single one of us? No, you're not.
That's what
Fuck
we've
off.
seen too. And I do think the courts, I think the universities, I think the law firms are learning. Like like Columbia University, they're like, all right, we'll go along with what you want. We're going to follow your, we're going to do your thing that you asked us to do. And then that's not enough. Now we're going to take over your Middle Eastern Studies department. That's not enough. Now we're going to put you under a consent decree. Like, it's never enough. If you give an inch to fascists, they're just going to continue to push. The only answer is a solidarity and a standing up to them. And we haven't seen that from any of the Republicans.
Yeah,
this time
ironically,
around.
the only thing they respect is strength.
Yeah.
This is why Trump, he
That's
looks
the
at
only
other
chance you have.
authoritarian leaders. He looks at other authoritarian leaders and he's like, oh, those guys are impressive. Those guys are interesting. I like those guys. And that's why you see him like cowering in the face of China now when China's like, get on your knees and beg. You started the trade war. Get on your knees and beg. We're not changing anything. We're going to escalate too. You need to fix it. Right? So that's effectively, you need to do the same thing domestically. These guys got to hit a fucking brick wall.
Yeah.
If they don't hit a brick wall, I mean, they're
going to keep going. They're going to keep going until someone stops them.
That's right. And to that point, so Axios has this thing. I guess they talked to some Democrats about, all the chatter around Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Mm-hmm. And here's what they say. So this is from Axios. The sentiment within the party about rallying behind deportees is not universal.
Oh, my God.
The second House Democrat who spoke anonymously, a centrist, called the deportation issue a soup du jour, arguing Trump is setting a trap for the Democrats, and like usual, we're falling for it.
Oh, my God.
Quote, rather than talking about the tariff policy and the economy, the thing where his numbers are tanking, we're going to take the bait for one hairdresser, they said, likely referring to Andre Hernandez Romero. So, first of all, literally wrong on the polling merits. Like, this is not remotely popular.
Right.
Defying a court order. This person is totally innocent, and of course the polls show deporting innocent people is fucking in the toilets, of course. But even if that wasn't the case, can you imagine the degree of, like, political pundit brain rot you have to have in order to make a point? Deporting totally innocent people who did nothing wrong to a slave labor gulag that might be a death camp and saying you never get out under any circumstances. And by the way, 75 to 90% of the people who are there are totally innocent, according to all the report. Looking at that and going, well, I've done my political calculations and I've come to the conclusion this is not the most effective issue for us. What the fuck? You have no morality. Just like Chris Cillizza. Tell everybody what Chris Cillizza said. That was fucking insane.
Yeah. He says, let me make the case for why Democrats should not keep talking so much about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Stick with me here. The Dow Jones dropped almost 700 points. The NASDAQ dropped. The head of the Federal Reserve said inflation was likely to go up. Did you hear about that? Any of it? Probably not, because the lead story on every homepage and every hour of cable TV was Garcia. The simple fact is that there can be only one dominant news story at a time, and right now it's clearly the legal and political fight over the deportation of Garcia. Now ask yourself, which issue is better politically for Democrats, immigration or tariffs? First of all, I completely reject the framing that you can only talk about one thing, only get attention on one thing. I think that is utter and complete garbage nonsense.
100%.
Putting that aside, you have no soul. You have no morals. You have no values whatsoever. You have no conscience. And this type of thinking, I think, is precisely why Democrats have been losing.
Of course, because it's like you don't believe in anything.
You don't believe in anything. And this is, even if it was just, quote unquote, just about this one innocent man being locked in a torture dungeon for life, people should fight. People should be upset. But this is not just about one man. This is about all of us.
That's right. That could be you, Chris Cillizza, you dumb bitch.
This is about this administration's ability to kidnap whoever they want and lock them in a dungeon forever with no due process whatsoever. That is what this is about. And if they can do it to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They can do it to you, Crystalisa. They can do it to me. They can do it to you. They can do it to whoever they want.
There's no due
long
process.
as they get the planes in the air before anyone can say anything, they have found, one of the judges described it as a path to perfect lawlessness. That is why this administration is fighting so hard with regard to this one individual. And that is why we all, anyone with a shred of integrity or conscience, should be fighting so hard to make sure that he is returned, that Andre, the gay makeup artist, is returned, that all of the people who were sent there. Because think about that, even the ones who were criminals, this is worse treatment than we give serial killers in this country who get due process and get locked up in a supermax. This is vastly worse. They don't get any time outside. They barely get fed. There's 65, 70 people locked in a cell, no mattresses, no sheets. I mean, and a lot of questions about what else is going on there as well. Rife with human rights abuses. The whole point of this place is you never come out. That is the point. So you tell me what you think. What other things do you think are going on there?
And by the way, we should be clear with our language. These aren't deportations. These are kidnappings.
Yeah, that's
Deportation implies
That's
some
right.
level of due process.
Right.
There was no due process.
And being
this
sent
is kidnapping,
back
and this
to your
is human
country.
trafficking.
These people are not even from this country. You sent them to a foreign gulag in a third country, and Trump is out saying, I mean, how dumb can you be? He says, the homegrowns are next. Bukele is said he's going to double the capacity.
Yeah.
And that it's up to the U.S. to fill it. That's what he said.
But Crystalisa thing, it's only going to be the bad ones, so I'm okay with that. It's only the bad ones. You're right, because
That's what we've seen.
Yeah, and like you trust the judgment of this administration to determine who's bad and who's not. One more point. So first of all, Crystalisa, you're a fucking monster. You're a disgusting human being. Second of all, this argument that he's making reminds me of the type of person who would criticize the logistics on the Trail of Tears, or the logistics on the train to Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. It's like, it looks like the train broke down and there was a problem with the wheel. You're executing this so stupidly. I mean, it makes more sense if it's actually efficient, right? It's like this is the level of conversation that you're having.
Or it would be like, instead of focusing on Auschwitz, would be like, look at how the economy under Hitler, look at the price of eggs under Hitler.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
like you guys need to focus on how the price of bread is through the roof. What are you doing talking about this? This is just a soup du jour distraction, and you're falling into the trap. It's like,
retire. Fucking
oh my
retire.
God.
You have no place in political commentary.
And he's
It's
not even right
disgusting.
about the polling.
No, of course. That's what I said. He's not even right about fucking polling. He's not right about fucking polling. Jesus Christ.
I can't.
All right, let's move on. So we got Trump's counterterrorism czar, big head Sebastian Gorka, is he went on, I guess, is this Newsmax? I'm not sure if this is Newsmax. Rob Schmidt Tonight. I've never even heard of that one. I don't know if it's Newsmax. It's Newsmax. Okay, thank you, control room. Yeah. So so he's on Newsmax, and look, this clip speaks for itself. This is absolutely fucking bone-chilling. Watch this.
Realize that the taxonomy of politics in America is dead. It's not left and right. It's not even Republican or Democrat. There's one line that divides us. Do you love America or do you hate America? It's really quite that simple. And we have people who love America, like the president, like his cabinet, like the directors of his agencies, who want to protect Americans. And then there is the other side that is on the side of the cartel members, on the side of the illegal aliens, on the side of the terrorists. And you have to ask yourself, are they technically aiding and abetting them? Because aiding and abetting criminals and terrorists is a crime in federal statute, Rob.
This is so ironic to me. He's talking, oh, you don't love America if you're defending Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I would argue the polar fucking opposite. Mm-hmm. The best version of ourselves is abiding by the Constitution, is abiding by freedom of speech and due process and everybody having rights. That's the best of us. And what he's saying is, if you speak out in defense of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, maybe you're giving support to terrorism and maybe you're committing a felony. That's what he's saying right now.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the same fucking people, and I got more on this in just a second, who suck themselves off about, oh, we're so pro free speech, bro. We love free speech, bro. All those pink-haired college kids on, who are shutting down Ben Shapiro from giving a speech. They hate free speech. And it's like, now you guys are in power. I've never seen a more clear crackdown on freedom in my life. They don't categorize it like that. They talk about it like, no, this part is necessary. But when we say we believe in free speech, we want people to be able to say retard and pussy in public with no consequences. That's what we mean.
Yeah, that's what they are doing is foundationally anti-American. I mean, it is. And these are also the people who like talk all about Western civilization, blah, blah, blah. It's a rejection of the freaking Magna Carta. Like,
which came out in 1215, by the way.
That's where we are. Like, they want to turn us into El Salvador or some freaking like, developing world penal colony under an authoritarian dictator. 1 out of every 57 Salvadorans has been thrown into prison in that country. That's what they're modeling us after. It is brazenly anti-American. And keep in mind, this man is not just some random talking head on Newsmax.
That's right.
He is the counter-terror czar for the White House, something Ken Klippenstein has been trying to raise alarms about. Seb Gorka has a lot of power, this administration.
That's right.
So when he says, you people who are opposing, who are showing up at rallies, who are on Twitter, who are talking on talk shows, who are opposing these deportations to a slave labor camp, you are aiding and abetting terrorists, and that is a felony. His words have meaning there. That could be official government policy coming from him. And that's not all. We know that this administration we've heard them verbally talk about pro-Palestine protesters as terrorists. Anti-Tesla protesters have been deemed domestic terrorists, so you can't harbor ill sentiment against Tesla or else you're a terrorist. They are even expanding that to people who are part of the hands-off protest movement, millions of Americans across the country, coast to coast, again, thanks to Ken's reporting, terrorists. So, as we move closer to this date of April 20th, 4/20, when Trump is going to get his report about whether or not he should invoke the Insurrection Act, one of the possibilities of what he could do with that invocation is set our military in our streets against our own people who are protesting this government and this rapid shift to authoritarianism and fascism. All of that is on the table. And so when you hear the words of Seb Gorka, who classifies everybody who's a political opponent of him or of the Trump administration as a terrorist, these things have meaning and are being codified as official government policy.
The Department of State tweeted the following, ready? As we recommit this country to its core constitutional free speech principles at home, we will remain vigilant abroad, not just against threats from adversaries such as communist China, but also from less expected countries where authoritarian censorship is gradually strangling true freedom of speech. And they have a quote from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State here, that says, the best way to counter disinformation is free speech.
Oh my God.
And so Midas Touch quote tweeted that with a headline from The Intercept. And it says, in Trump's America, you can be disappeared for writing an op-ed.
That's right.
Which is what happened to Rumesa Ozturk,
who
wrote a mild pro-Palestine op-ed.
In a student newspaper.
And was black-bagged and dis-a-fucking-peered.
Free speech.
The thing that I really can't, the thing that I just can't wrap my mind around is how in the midst of this fascist takeover, they simultaneously pretend to be embracing the opposite values of free speech and openness and freedom. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it would honestly be an easier pill to swallow if they were just direct about what they're doing, right? Like, no, we don't believe in freedoms. We don't believe in the Constitution. We believe in order above something like free speech. We don't want any dissent. And so that's why we're doing it. But no, they still pretend like, no, we're the paragons of virtue and freedom in the Constitution, as they literally try to shred it every single day right in front of our faces.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. They will co-opt this liberal values language and completely pervert it to mean the exact opposite of what its intended meaning is. And you see this with regards to the crackdown on pro-Palestine protesters. They claim to be doing this crackdown in service of protecting people against anti-Semitism and creating a safe space for Jewish students. And meanwhile, so many Jewish people and Jewish students have come out and said, you are not doing your authoritarian crackdown in our name. No, these are not liberal values. This is the polar opposite. You are rapidly pushing us into an authoritarian, illiberal regime. And so this is, very common rhetorical tactic that they will use to adopt this progressive sounding, liberal sounding language or positioning to effectuate actively authoritarian ends.
So Attorney General Pam Bondi came out and tweeted, we are releasing additional information on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and sent it to a justice.gov website, and people were looking at it. Literally had zero new information. They're basically trying to do the same thing they did with the fake Epstein files that they released, where they were like, oh, we're releasing the Epstein files, bro. And it was something that was released a decade earlier by Gawker, right?
And it was a more redacted version.
And then they redacted it
yeah.
further. Like, and it's like, who the fuck do you think you're fooling? They did the same thing with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, trying to say, oh, no, he's definitely an MS-13 gang member. Totally made up. Completely and utterly made up. Zero evidence for it whatsoever. He has zero. He's never committed a crime. Never committed a crime.
Right.
So somebody replies to that and says, where is he? Right? Mm-hmm. Twitter puts a banner underneath it. Visibility limited. This post may violate X's rules against hateful conduct.
Oh, more free speech here. More free speech in the chat.
I mean, we're living in an episode of Black Mirror at this point, right?
Yeah, truly.
Like, we truly are.
Truly. And I just briefly on the gang allegations here, we've learned so much about, we know exactly what happened. He gets picked up. He's at a Home Depot parking lot. In 2019, I think.
Yep.
He gets picked up, and some confidential informant, who these people are notoriously sketchy and, basically get paid to lie, claims he's in a gang in MS-13, in a branch of it in Long Island where he does not live and has rarely, if ever, been. That, plus the fact that he's wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. That is the entirety of what they're hanging this. He's one of the top members of MS-13. He's a human trafficker. No one has ever presented any evidence. There is zero indication of that. They'll just make it up. Furthermore, this cop, who was the original one who filed the field report that Pam Bondi is now, re-upping and putting out there again. This guy was fired weeks later for sharing secret information with a sex worker that he had hired. So crooked cop, thrown out. There's, you can look at the rulings from the judges who say the government has presented no evidence that he's in a gang. So that's what we're talking about here. And by the way, you know what? Even if you're in a gang, you don't get no due process and locked up. We have a presumption of innocence in this country. We have a guarantee of due process in this country. And now this man who, has no criminal record whatsoever. Nothing has been proven about this man in court in terms of any sort of crime. This man is getting worse treatment than serial killers locked up in a supermax in this country for life, or getting, it's just. The people that defend this, they can never be forgiven. They can never be forgiven.
Separated the 3 day laborers and talked to them one-on-one each and said, if you give me information, I'll let you go. And it was one of the other day laborers who pointed to him and said, yeah, he's in a gang in New York. Well, he's never fucking been in New York. He never lived in New York.
Right.
He never lived in New York.
Right.
And so clearly that was that guy trying to just hey, man, I want no problems. You want me to tell you something? I'll tell you something, and I'll get the fuck out of here. And, and that's what they use. That's the evidence.
And here's what I want people to understand, too. The key point here is that the courts had said in a lawful ruling he cannot be removed to El Salvador.
He had a protection from
That is the
deportation.
only detail you actually need to know. He cannot be removed to El Salvador, and they deported him to El Salvador, to this horrible prison.
That's right.
So if they can do that to him, they can do whatever they want to whomever they want. Yeah. That is the import of this story. All of the other details, it's important to know that they're lying and all of that. But that is the only thing you really need to know about this story, is that you had a lawful court order. They acknowledged that they screwed up. And their position is, it doesn't matter. He can stay in the dungeon for life. And we don't care.
So the IRS is now making plans to rescind the tax-exempt status of Harvard. This is all part of Trump's war on Harvard.
Yeah.
He tried to get them to concede to some demands he had early on. They were open to conceding on some demands, but just like what happened with Columbia, they initially agreed to some demands. And then, as we always say, you give the fascists an inch, they'll take a mile. And then now he's basically seizing colleges and universities and trying to put them under this academic conservatorship type idea, where it's no, now we get to run everything. So he literally wants MAGA affirmative action.
Yeah.
They want to axe the courses that go against their ideology.
Right.
They basically want to do a full fascist authoritarian grip on the universities to try to make them, conservatism mills where you chug out people who are fucking brainwashed, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. And so Harvard in particular, as soon as it was clear, hey, here's our list of demands, and the demands were fucking beyond preposterous, they were like, yeah, nah, we're not fucking doing this, right? And so Harvard is fighting, and Trump is continuing to raise the stakes and retaliate and retaliate and retaliate. And in this instance, now he's saying, I want to he frees whatever money the federal government gives them. He's like, we're not giving that money, right? And then now also with the IRS trying to rescind their tax exempt status.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, both in terms of, number one, the broader goal of Trump and, allies like Chris Rufo. This is a broader, right-wing project, is an ideological one to punish the accurate teaching of American history that includes things like redlining, that includes things like, the accurate history of Reconstruction, slavery, Jim Crow. They want to
just whitewash the whole history of this country.
They want to whitewash the whole history. Yeah. And Jason Stanley wrote a book called Erasing History that's about the way that this is a consistent playbook with fascists, where you can only glorify the country. Trump has issued executive orders about quote unquote patriotic education. Again, what that means is that you can't actually tell the truth about the nation's history.
Right.
So there is a broad ideological agenda there. And then there is also an agenda vis-a-vis these universities in general, but especially the Ivy League, elite universities, is they see this as a separate power center. And so they want to destroy it. And, Columbia immediately bends the knee, but they made a kind of tactical error because, to your point, Harvard was willing to basically bend the knee as well.
You're saying Trump made a tactical error?
Yeah, Trump made Columbia made a horrendous error, obviously. But Trump made a tactical error because they even after Columbia bent the knee, then they went further and they're taking over the Middle Eastern Studies Department. They're putting Columbia under a consent decree. Columbia bending the knee did not save them from even more increase.
It made it worse.
That's right. It just encouraged them to go further. So Harvard sees this example and is like, well, why comply when this is what you get for it? They just keep going. It just makes it worse. And so Harvard, with their $53 billion endowment, is the best positioned institution in the entire country to be able to stand up to them. So they are in this certain way, and MIT has followed suit. And, it's helping to give a direction and create some solidarity among other academic institutions. But, obviously the war is far from over, and stripping the tax exempt status has a significant impact. I mean, these are also research institutions. A lot of the funding that the Trump administration has already pulled goes to things like, medical research and those sorts of things. So if you strip the tax exempt status, it makes it much less likely that you're going to get the sort of funding and donations that enable you to do that sort of research. It will be significant for Harvard, and it also sets an example for institutions that do not have a $53 billion endowment and do not have that position of strength and wealth that Harvard particularly does. But, one thing Jason Stanley says is he's like, ask yourself whether there are liberal universities in authoritarian countries. Obviously not.
And now, by the way, the lawyers are fighting back too. So initially, a bunch of them bent the knee, and we're going to do a whole bunch of pro bono work for Trump in the tens of millions of dollar range. And then they realized, because other lawyers came out and they all signed this letter, over 100 firms were like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. Yeah. Right? And so then the ones that had initially agreed are now balking. So it looks like there was overreach, and people are starting to wake up and realize, oh, okay, we all have to band together and say fuck no to all of it, because if we don't, we're cooked.
And I think the public protests have helped people to grow some backbone as well, seeing millions of people out on the streets.
Well, and the media now too. Every time I turn on MSNBC, it's like I'm watching Crystal Kyle and Friends or Secular Talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We've been passing around clips oh my God, we never thought we'd see this on MSNBC.
You got Nicole Wallace basically where's our Che Guevara at?
Nicole Wallace Bernie Sanders and AOC are the leaders. They are the best. They're doing the thing everyone should be doing. It's oh my God, I never thought I would see this.
Yeah, never. All right, so a few more things. We only got 2 minutes until Ben gets in here, but let me just run you through these things real quick. So the Trump administration plans to eliminate the IRS's direct file program, which is the electronic system for filing your tax returns for free. Would you like to take a guess the reason why he did that?
I'm going to guess it has something to do with money in TurboTax.
Yes, TurboTax gave him for his inauguration $1 million, and so now he's axing free tax filing returns. We also have this huge scandal that credit to David Schroeder at the lever. Trump's IRS nominee Billy Long just had his personal debt paid off by donors whose firms have business before the IRS. And so we all know what's going to happen here. Six-figure debt paid off by these people. He's going to turn around, clean their slate with the IRS. They're good to go. Well, so massive corruption.
Not only that, but now, he will have to be loyal to whatever Trump wants. Of course, so when this connects to the Harvard tax exempt situation, because he would have to be the one to strip them of their tax
he'll do whatever
status.
They want because he just got his debt paid off. He'll do whatever the fuck they want. He's a little fucking cuck boy.
That's exactly right.
And by the way, go look at a picture of him. He looks like a cuck boy. His name is Billy Long. Go Google Billy Long. I'm sorry that you had to look at that. All right. Then we have the Daily Beast is reporting that the Pentagon's elite tech unit is now collapsing after clashing with Elon Musk's Doge. And so this all ties into what we learned the other day. There was an NLRB whistleblower who came out who were like, hey, man, these guys hacked into the NLRB, stole a bunch of sensitive data, covered their tracks to make it so like you couldn't particularly track exactly what they were doing. Then there was some fucking IP address in Russia that went in. The second they got in, the IP address in Russia got in. And then now this guy's he's a whistleblower. He's getting threatening letters and a drone picture of him walking his dog, right? So it's worst case scenario. What we're talking about here is who the fuck is Elon Musk working for? Who is Doge working for? They have nefarious deals with foreign governments, not only to steal our data, but to destroy our entire government. And so that's now on the table. That's now a real question. Who the fuck is Elon working with? I mean, he has deals with China. He has deals with Russia. He has business deals all over the place. It looked like he might be on the payroll of some of these people based on the reporting from this whistleblower who was like, you have no idea what's going on and what we realize now.
Yeah. I mean, that story is so insane.
Yeah, I know.
Mass exportation of data, all of it.
And then the final one here, and this is a big one, but Judge Boasberg came out and said the court ultimately determines that the government's actions on that day demonstrate a willful disregard for its order, sufficient for the court to conclude that probable cause exists to find the government in criminal contempt. So this is Judge Boasberg saying, yeah, you definitely disregarded my multiple court orders when I told you to turn the fucking plane around, for example. And you said, tee-hee-hee, your ruling doesn't apply because it's over international waters. That was totally made up, by the way. Everybody knows that's fake. Oh, he did a verbal order. It doesn't count. Tee-hee-hee. Everybody knows verbal orders count just as much as written order.
Right.
Right? So now he's starting the proceedings for criminal contempt. This is like on top of what Judge Zinnes is doing, which is a 2-week fact-finding period before she probably reaches the same conclusion.
Yeah.
So it's all coming to a head, man. Deep, deep, deep inside the constitutional crisis. If it's a slippery slope, we're at the bottom of that fucking slope. It's all coming to a head.
I was talking to Pisco about this, because he's a lawyer and following this stuff really closely. And he was like, this is a big deal because
For sure.
you're getting very close to starting to ask the questions like, which person do the guys with the guns listen to?
Right.
Because if you have criminal contempt, the options available are like fines or imprisonment. Okay, well, who does the imprisonment? That would be the U.S. federal marshals, who are under the Department of Justice, obviously executive branch. Trump would obviously say, no, you're not going to do that. But they are statutorily obligated to enforce the rulings of the court system. So what would they do?
Right.
And that is where we're rapidly getting to.
Right.
And I think Zinnes is also very likely to help them ultimately in contempt.
Yeah.
She's doing her 2-week fact-finding period.
Yeah.
That also seems to be building up to contempt charges.
Yeah. Final point before we bring Ben Norton in. There are other avenues where they could seize assets and they can fine people. They also have the ability to like deputize somebody else other than the marshals to carry out their order. But the deputizing thing, that's literally like a provision of law that exists but hasn't been used since like the Wild West.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's where we are. We're in the Wild
But
West.
I tend to favor the seizing assets and doing fines because in the Axios article I read, they made clear that's like the one thing Trump he has no recourse on.
Yeah.
So if they start seizing the assets and fining the lower level DHS or ICE employees who are actually doing the physical work, then that creates a chilling effect where if Trump can't save you and your assets are frozen, you can't get to your bank because you were sending people to a gulag, well, guess what? You're a lot less likely to fucking carry out those dirty orders and send people to the gulag. And so that's the approach I like, because if he were to go after the Pam Bondis or go after the Kristi Noems or the people at the top who are making those decisions, we all know Trump's going to intervene immediately and do whatever he can. But you start by freezing the assets of the lower level people. And then if that doesn't work, you go up the chain until you get to the Pam Bondis and the fucking, whoever's at the top, Kristi Noem, and you freeze their assets. And again, he has no recourse over that. There's nothing he can do about that. Whereas when you're talking about sending the U.S. Marshals to arrest people, that is a clash because they're under the branch of the executive. And they're supposed to carry out the orders of the judiciary. But if Trump says, I'm the head of the executive, and I say, don't do it, like you said, then there's the constitutional crisis. So I want to try to avoid that as much as possible. I want to try to stay in the lane of let's do what we can without having to rely on any of their good faith.
Well, also, I think he could just pardon them, can't he?
Well, exactly. But for the freezing the assets, he can't do anything. There's nothing he can do.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying that's the move. That's the move. But, then there's other technical legal questions as to like maybe one one way of going is viewed as the more proper way of doing it. And so if they were to freeze the assets, maybe the Supreme Court steps in and says you can't do that. You have some U.S. Marshals, and then boom, we're right back to the place where we don't want to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, as you put it, it's all coming to a head.
That's
and
right.
with regard to the Supreme Court as well, I mean, they've already flouted this 9-0 ruling. I'm sure that Judge Roberts and all the rest have taken quite note of, like, oh, you can't even give them an inch.
You can't give them a fucking inch.
You
Not an
cannot
inch.
do. I don't know why they didn't realize this already. Like, who you thought you were dealing with, I have no idea. But they have to be watching closely the way that their order is being completely lied about and subverted.
Hey guys, this is only a small piece of a very long interview with Ben Norton of Geopolitical Economy Report. He's an expert on everything that's going on with the tariffs and the trade war and China. You're definitely going to want to see the whole interview. Sign up below on Substack in order to do that.